Good morning. Today is Wednesday, May 13th, in the year 2020, and we're going to be continuing our study of Genesis, looking at the account of Abraham. Last time we read about Hagar and Ishmael in chapter 16, and the renewal of the covenant and the inclusion of circumcision in chapter 17. Today we're going to read a more famous narrative account, I think, from chapter 18. We'll just see how far we get. But let us begin. Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abram. After so long of making myself say Abram, I now can't say Abraham. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting in the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought. You may wash all your feet, that you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." At this point, Abraham is simply being a proper host. Um, it is not that these men have shown themselves as something significant. Uh, Abraham does not know that the Lord is appearing to him just yet. He is simply being polite. So Abraham hurried into the tent of Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread." He ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set them before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. So this is taken all day. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years. Sarah was past the age of bearing children. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child, that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I'll return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied. "I did not laugh." But he said, "Oh, yes, you did laugh." Last time we talked about how Isaac, meaning he laughed, seems to get his name from two different places. In the previous chapter, chapter 17, it's Abraham who laughs. And now it's Sarah. When the men got up to leave, they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about to Abraham what he has promised." And the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." We have a very anthropomorphic God, a very human-shaped God in this story. Not consistent with our theology about God being omniscient, all-knowing, omnipresent, everywhere at once, but rather this is a relatable story. There is a lesson to be learned here, and it is beyond the circumstances of the story. In the same way that the temptation of Adam and Eve, or the flood, or the Tower of Babel need not be taken exactly, neither does the story of Abraham have to be taken exactly. The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remaining standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Abraham spoke again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? If I find 45 people there, I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke. "What if only 40 people are found there? For the sake of 40, I will not do it. May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." He said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. So, we're seeing this picture of the Lord and 2 angels attending him. He has this conversation with Abraham, and the conversation really is, why does the Lord allow wickedness to prosper? It is a question of theodicy, God's justice. And here the answer is, the wicked are not destroyed for the sake of the righteous, which seems weird. But if we think about Sodom and Gomorrah getting wiped out, God says, if there are a handful of righteous people, I will not bring judgment on the city for their sake. It could be an answer to the question, someone might come to a priest or a rabbi and say, "Master, why does God allow this to go on?" And he might return and say, "Well, let me tell you a story about Abraham and the Lord." And by the end of it, the answer will be given. God does not destroy for the sake of the righteous. The 2 angels arrived at Sodom in the evening. Okay, so the Lord has gone, and we have these 2 angels. Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up and met them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then get on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and enter his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men of every part of the city of Sodom Both young and old surrounded the house. They called to Lot. Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may have sex with them. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you like. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under my protection of my roof. Get out of the way, they replied, and they said, This fellow came here as an alien, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved towards to break the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were outside the door, young and old, with blindness, but they could not find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city. But the son-in-laws thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are there, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. When he hesitated, the men grasped his hands and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city. But the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away. But Lot said to them, No, my lords, please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here's a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. He said to him, Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That is why the town is called Zoar. Zoar means small. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. The Lord raised down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, including all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back. She became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, towards all the land of the plain. He saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham. He brought Lot out of the catastrophe and overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. All right. A lot of baggage on this story and a lot of questions about what's going on. The 2 men, the angels, arrive at the city. Lot is sitting in the gate, a place of gathering for the respected men of the city, typically the older men or the wealthy who don't have anything else to do, to sit and judge and settle disputes. Lot sees these 2 men coming and maybe has some glimmer of recognition, or perhaps Lot is simply been raised right and sees 2 strangers in a city that he knows to be dangerous to strangers and insists that they come home with him. At first they say, Oh no, we will just sleep out in the open in the square. No, you can't do that. You need to come home with me. So he does. But there's a crowd outside his house. And the question is, what is exactly their sin? We have come to take the word sodomy and apply it to, well, really to any illegal sexual activity. but primarily the homosexuality. But that's not the sin of the men of the city. In fact, that's not even the issue here. It's the violation of guest law. No matter what culture you are in the ancient world, you would understand the role of host and guest and the obligations thereof. Lot has extended his protection to these men, as far as he knows them to be. And the people of the city should be treating strangers in their city with respect. But instead, they see these men as victims, as people that they can use and abuse for their own end without consequence. They are without morals. And you say, well, how can you say that? How can you say that? Because we have these shining examples of hospitality, of host behavior towards guests in the story of Abraham and the story of Lot here, that stands in contrast to the actions of the men of the city. Within context, the evil the men of the city wish to perpetrate is the violation, literally, of a guest's protection. Now, we may not think Lot is all the greatest in the world here, nor in what follows. He offers his daughters, who are virgins. Now, they are apparently betrothed, meaning they are of age to be married, but they're just not yet. He offers them instead. I can't imagine doing such a thing. But Lot is doing everything he can short of giving these men up. But it's not going to work. And this is why judgment is brought down on Sodom and Gomorrah. The example sin is the violation of host responsibilities, the abuse of strangers, the attempt to get away with something simply because they think there will be no consequences. That is what Sodom and Gomorrah get judged for. And so, Lot is allowed to flee to a tiny town called Small for protection. We are told his wife looks back and turns to a pillar of salt. There are lots of pillars of salt around in the region of the Dead Sea, which traditionally this place is. Maybe it's just an explanation for why there are pillars of salt. Maybe there is something more here. Maybe Lot's wife misses the evils of the city and so participates in their destruction. We're going to wrap up the story with Lot here, and it's a little unsettling. You might want to stop here if you know what's about to happen and don't want to hear it again. Lot and his two daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his two daughters lived in a cave. One day the oldest said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to lie with us. This is custom over all the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then lie with him and preserve our family line through our father." That night they got their father to drink wine. The oldest daughter went in and lay with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. Next day the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I lay with my father. Let him get drunk. Let him drink wine again tonight. And you go in and lie with him, so that we can preserve our family line through our father." They got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and lay with him. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of Moabites today. The younger daughter also had a son. She named him Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites today. Okay, one last explanation of his daughter's incestuous rape of their father. The two groups, the Moabites and the Ammonites, are historical enemies of the Israelites in Canaan and the surrounding area. It is by saying they are the descendants of incest and rape, the authors are saying something about the character of those nations. It is very insulting to them, and that's primarily why it's here. But it also shows the importance of that concept of seed and name that we have talked about. Now, fortunately, at this point, Lot drops out of the story. Lot's version is done. We will continue next time. Chapter 20, we will go over very quickly because it is a repeat. And then we will get into 21 and 22, which will, in a lot of ways, wrap up the story of Abraham. Until then, may God watch over you and keep you safe.